The dancing plague that killed 400 people. History's most bizarre mass hysteria event. What if I told you that in 1518, a woman named Frau Troffea stepped into the streets of Strasbourg, France, and began dancing? Not celebrating, not performing, but dancing uncontrollably, violently, desperately. And then something happened that defies all logic, all science, all human understanding. Within days, 34 more people joined her. Within a month, 400 people were dancing in the streets. And they couldn't stop. They danced until their feet bled. They danced until they collapsed from exhaustion. They danced until their hearts gave out. And at least 15 people danced themselves to death. This isn't medieval folklore. This isn't a fairy tale. This is documented historical fact. And what really happened is far more terrifying than any conspiracy theory you've ever heard. Engagement setup, 20 to 45 seconds. But before we dive into this nightmare that has puzzled historians for 500 years, I need you to prepare yourself. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about human psychology, mass hysteria, and the mysterious forces that can control the human mind. If this story gives you chills, and trust me, it will, smash that like button and subscribe, because we're about to explore one of history's most documented yet unexplained events. An event so bizarre that modern scientists still can't agree on what really happened in those blood-soaked streets of Strasbourg. Voice becomes conspiratorial, and stick around until the end, because I'm going to reveal a modern conspiracy theory about this event that will blow your mind. Setting the historical scene, picture this. It's July 1518, Strasbourg, Alsace, now modern-day France, but then part of the Holy Roman Empire. The city is recovering from recent famines, floods, and disease. People are superstitious, deeply religious, and living in constant fear of divine punishment. The summer is hot, oppressive. The narrow medieval streets trap the heat like an oven. Tensions are high, food is scarce, and the people are desperately looking for someone to blame for their misfortunes. Into this powder keg of fear and desperation steps a woman whose name would become synonymous with one of history's most inexplicable events, Frau Troffea. We don't know much about her. She was probably middle-aged, likely poor, possibly suffering from some form of mental distress. But on that fateful July morning, she would trigger a phenomenon so strange, so horrifying, that would be documented by multiple independent sources and studied by scholars for centuries. Pause for dramatic effect. What happened next sounds like fiction. But I assure you, every detail I'm about to share is backed by historical records, eyewitness accounts, and official documents from the time. The outbreak begins. It started innocently enough. Frau Troffea stepped out of her house and began to dance. Not the joyful dancing of celebration, but something different. Something wrong. Witnesses described her movements as frantic, desperate, almost violent. Her limbs jerked and spasmed. Her face was contorted in what looked like agony. But she couldn't stop. For hours, she danced. The sun blazed down on the cobblestones. Sweat poured from her body. Her breathing became labored. But still she danced. People gathered to watch. At first, they thought it was a performance, maybe a religious ecstasy. But as the hours turned into a full day, then 2 days, then 3, the crowd's amusement turned to horror. Because Frau Troffea was clearly suffering. She was exhausted, dehydrated, her feet were bleeding, but some invisible force seemed to compel her to keep moving. And then, on the 4th day, something happened that would turn this individual tragedy into a mass catastrophe. A shoemaker named Herr Klein joined her, then a butcher's wife, then a young apprentice, then a merchant. One by one, people began dancing alongside Frau Troffea, their movements just as frantic, just as uncontrollable. By the end of the first week, 34 people were dancing in the town square. By the end of the month, historical records show that over 400 people had been afflicted by this mysterious dancing compulsion. And here's the part that will haunt you. They literally could not stop. The horror escalates. What happened over the next 2 months was like something out of a horror movie. Imagine walking through the streets of Strasbourg and seeing hundreds of people dancing in apparent agony. their clothes torn, their feet leaving bloody footprints on the stones. Graphic description with dramatic pauses. The dancers' feet swelled and split open. Their legs gave out, but they kept moving on their knees. Some danced until they literally collapsed from heart attacks. Others died from strokes brought on by exhaustion. City records show that at the peak of the outbreak, people were dying at a rate of about 1 per day. The death toll reached at least 15, though some historians believe it was much higher, possibly over 100. But here's what makes this even more terrifying. The authorities had no idea what to do. This was 1518. There was no understanding of psychology, no concept of mass hysteria, no medical knowledge that could explain what was happening. The city's response. The Strasbourg City Council consulted physicians who diagnosed it as hot blood. Essentially, they thought people's blood was overheating and causing the uncontrollable movement. So what did they prescribe? More dancing. I'm not making this up. The official response was to encourage the dancing to tire out the afflicted. They hired professional dancers and musicians. They built stages. They turned the entire city into a massive dance floor. Can you imagine? People are literally dying from exhaustion, and the authorities decide the solution is to make them dance more. Obviously, this made everything worse. More people joined the dancing plague. More people died. The mysterious aspects now. Here's where this story goes from horrifying to absolutely mind-bending. Because the more you examine the historical records, the more questions arise that have no rational answers. Question 1. The selectivity. Why did only certain people get affected? The plague didn't spread like a disease. It wasn't random. Witnesses reported that people would suddenly start dancing after looking at the other dancers for extended periods. It was almost as if the dancing was contagious through sight alone. Question 2. The synchronization. Multiple witnesses describe how the dancers seemed to move in unnatural synchronization at times, as if they were responding to music that only they could hear. But here's the chilling part. There was no music playing when this synchronization occurred. Question 3. The religious angle. Many of the dancers were heard calling out to Saint Vitus, the patron saint of dancers and, ironically, the protector against dancing plagues. They seem to be both cursed by dancing and desperately praying to the saint associated with it. This has led some researchers to suggest that the dancing plague wasn't random at all, that it was somehow connected to religious practices, possibly even occult rituals that went wrong. Question 4. The sudden and perhaps most mysteriously of all, the plague ended as suddenly as it began. In early September 1518, the dancing simply stopped. The remaining dancers collapsed, slept for days, and when they woke up, they had no memory of the previous months. It was as if some invisible switch had been flipped, releasing hundreds of people from a spell they couldn't break. Historical explanations and theories. For 500 years, historians, scientists, and researchers have tried to explain what happened in Strasbourg. The theories range from the scientific to the supernatural, and honestly, none of them fully explain the evidence. Ergot poisoning. Some scientists believe the dancers consumed bread made from rye infected with ergot fungus, which can cause hallucinations and convulsions. Ergot contains compounds similar to LSD, but this doesn't explain why only certain people were affected or why the symptoms were so specifically focused on dancing rather than general hallucinations. Mass psychogenic illness. Modern psychologists suggest it was mass hysteria, a psychological contagion that spread through a stressed population. This explains the selectivity and the visual contagion aspect. Stressed, superstitious people in a crisis-ridden city might indeed be susceptible to psychological epidemics. But it doesn't explain the physical synchronization, the specific religious elements, or the sudden, complete cessation. Theory 3. Religious ecstasy gone wrong. Some historians believe it was related to underground religious practices, possibly banned pagan rituals or extreme Christian mysticism that somehow spiraled out of control. This theory is particularly intriguing because of the St. Vitus connection and the fact that similar dancing plagues occurred at other religious sites throughout medieval Europe. Social rebellion. A few researchers suggest it was a form of social protest, a way for the oppressed population to express their frustration with authority in a way that couldn't be directly punished because it appeared to be beyond their control. Think about it. If you wanted to rebel against an oppressive government but couldn't do it openly, what better way than a disease that forced you to disrupt normal social order? The conspiracy theory, but here's where this story takes a turn into modern conspiracy territory. In the 1990s, a researcher named Dr. Heinrich Müller claimed to have discovered documents in the Strasbourg city archives that had been classified for centuries. Voice drops to conspiratorial whisper, according to Müller. And I want to be clear, this is unverified and many historians dispute his claims. These documents suggested that the dancing plague was not spontaneous at all. The alleged conspiracy. Müller claimed the documents revealed that a secret society operating within the Catholic Church had been experimenting with what they called mass behavioral modification, essentially early attempts at mind control. According to this theory, Frau Troffea was not the first victim, but the first test subject. The society had allegedly been using a combination of drugs, hypnosis, and religious manipulation to see if they could control large populations. The documents supposedly describe how certain individuals were pre-selected and conditioned to respond to specific triggers, visual cues, sounds, or symbols that would activate their programmed behavior. The cover-up? Müller alleged that when the experiment went too far and people started dying, the society orchestrated the sudden end of the plague and then spent centuries ensuring that the true records were hidden. Now, I have to tell you, there's no independent verification of Müller's claims. The documents he referenced have never been made public. Most historians believe his theory is complete fiction. But here's what's interesting and disturbing about his claims. Modern parallels and implications whether or not you believe Müller's conspiracy theory. The dancing plague of 1518 raises terrifying questions about human psychology and mass behavior that are incredibly relevant today. Think about it. We live in an age of viral videos, social media challenges, and mass behavioral phenomena that spread faster than any medieval plague. We've seen dangerous challenges spread through TikTok that have actually harmed people. We've witnessed mass panic spread through social media faster than any factual information. We've seen entire populations become convinced of things that aren't true simply through repetition and social pressure. The dancing plague shows us that humans are far more susceptible to mass psychological influences than we'd like to admit. Whether it was ergot poisoning, mass hysteria, religious ecstasy, or something more sinister, 400 people lost control of their own bodies and minds. Modern questions. Could something like this happen today? Are we more susceptible now, with our constant connectivity and social media echo chambers? How would modern authorities respond to a similar outbreak? And most disturbing of all, if someone wanted to manipulate mass behavior today, would they be more successful than in 1518? Some researchers point to flash mobs, viral dance challenges, and even political rallies as evidence that we're just as susceptible to collective behavioral influence as our medieval ancestors. The only difference is that now, instead of affecting one city, a behavioral contagion could spread globally in hours. The cover-up continues? Here's something that might surprise you. And frankly, it surprised me when I discovered it during my research for this video. While preparing the script, I tried to find Dr. Heinrich Müller's original research about the conspiracy theory. What I found was strange. Several references to his work exist in academic databases from the 1990s, but the actual papers seem to have been removed or are listed as access restricted. His name appears in footnotes of other research, but tracking down his original claims is surprisingly difficult. Now, this could be completely innocent. Academic papers get removed for all sorts of reasons. Copyright issues, peer review problems, institutional changes. But it does make you wonder, if his claims were obviously false, why remove them? Wouldn't it be better to leave them up with clear rebuttals? And here's another strange detail. I found 3 different researchers who had apparently started investigating Müller's claims in the early 2000s. All 3 stopped their research abruptly and moved on to completely different topics. Again, this could be coincidence. Academic careers take unexpected turns all the time. But when you're dealing with a story about secret societies manipulating human behavior, these kinds of coincidences feel unsettling. The unanswered questions, so where does this leave us? After 500 years of investigation, the dancing plague of 1518 remains one of history's most documented yet unexplained events. We have the names of victims. We have multiple eyewitness accounts. We have official city records. We have medical observations from the time. We have more documentation about this event than we do about many major historical battles. Yet we still don't know what really happened. The core mysteries remain. Why did it start with Frau Troffea? How did it spread so specifically and selectively? What caused the synchronized movements? Why the religious elements? How did it end so suddenly? And most importantly, could it happen again? And if Dr. Mueller's conspiracy theory has even a grain of truth to it, then we're dealing with something far more sinister than mass hysteria or contaminated food. We're dealing with proof that human behavior can be manipulated on a massive scale, that secret groups have experimented with mind control for centuries, and that the evidence of these experiments has been systematically hidden. The really terrifying thought is this. If such experiments were happening in 1518 with primitive methods, what might be possible today with our advanced understanding of psychology, neuroscience, and mass media? Call to action and engagement before you go down the rabbit hole of researching this further. And trust me, you will. I need you to do something important. If this story fascinated you, if it gave you chills, if it made you question what you thought you knew about history and human behavior, smash that like button right now. Because stories like this, documented historical events that challenge our understanding of reality, deserve to be heard by millions. Subscribe to this channel if you want more content about history's strangest, most unexplained events. Because I promise you, the dancing plague is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to documented historical events that make no sense. But most importantly, tell me in the comments, what do you think really happened in Strasbourg? Mass hysteria? Ergot poisoning? Religious ecstasy? Or something more sinister? And if you've heard of similar unexplained mass behavioral events, share them in the comments. Because the more we research these phenomena, the more patterns we might discover. Share this video with anyone who loves unsolved mysteries, unexplained historical events, or conspiracy theories. Because the dancing plague of 1518 is all three rolled into one terrifying package. As you go about your day, remember Frau Troffea. Remember the 400 people who danced until they bled. Remember the 15 who danced themselves to death. Remember that we still don't know what force could compel hundreds of rational adults to dance themselves to exhaustion, to ignore pain, to override their most basic survival instincts. And remember that whatever that force was, it's still out there. Final dramatic, pause the dancing plague of 1518 ended abruptly in September. But it was not the first dancing plague in medieval Europe, and it was not the last. Similar events occurred in 1374, 1428, 1518, and as recently as 1840. Voice drops to whisper the question isn't whether the dancing plague could happen again. The question is, when? Sweet dreams.